In 1982, the Calloway family vanished from a cabin in the Idaho woods. No struggle, no goodbye, just silence where life had been. What began as a simple weekend retreat turned into one of the strangest disappearances the state had ever seen. What could drive a quiet, ordinary family to vanish so completely into the trees? The Callays were that kind of family, ordinary in the way that makes disappearances feel impossible. Harold Calloway, 38, was a mechanical engineer at the Clearwater Hydroelectric plant. He was the kind of man who still polished his work boots and labeled his toolbox drawers. People said you could set a clock by his morning routine. His wife, Margaret, 34, taught second grade at Elkford Elementary. She kept her handwriting neat and her voice calm, even when her students tested her patience. And then there were the kids. Samuel, age 10, quiet and shy, who loved to draw, and little Lucy, 6, a child who seemed to laugh at everything, especially when she carried her stuffed bear, Patch. They lived in a white 2-story house at the edge of town, close enough to smell pine in the wind, far enough to feel alone. On the morning of Friday, October 15, 1982, the family loaded up their blue Ford F-150 pickup truck, hitched a small utility trailer, and waved to their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Fletcher. "Just a weekend at the cabin," Margaret said. "Back Sunday night." It wasn't the first time they'd gone to Pinnerest Lake, a quiet patch of water tucked between old logging roads and miles of forest. The cabin had belonged to Harold's father, now passed, and had been in the family for nearly 30 years. A simple wooden structure with a brick chimney, 2 bedrooms, and a view of the lake that shimmered silver in autumn light. They left Elkford around 9:30 a.m. It was the last time anyone saw them alive. When Monday morning came, Margaret didn't show up at the school. Her class sat quietly until the principal sent them home. At the power plant, Harold missed his shift, something that, according to his supervisor, had never happened once in 10 years. By Tuesday, both sets of parents had tried calling. There was no answer. Deputies from Clearwater County drove the 2-hour route to Pinnerest Lake. The drive wound through switchbacks and single-lane mountain passes where the trees pressed close and the radio signal faded to static. When they arrived at the Calloway cabin, the front door was locked. Inside, the air smelled faintly of pine smoke and old coffee. Everything was in order. Beds made, plates rinsed and drying in the rack. Margaret's sweater still hanging on the hook by the door. But the family was gone. So was their truck. No overturned furniture, no blood, no sign of a struggle. It looked as if they had stepped outside for a moment and simply never returned. The sheriff's report described it as a non-violent disappearance, presumed accidental. Search teams were dispatched. Helicopters combed the winding roads between Elkford and Pinnerest. Divers searched the lake. Forest rangers on horseback traced trails from miles in every direction. Nothing. One of the deputies, a man named Collins, later recalled a detail that seemed unimportant at the time. When he'd first entered the cabin, he'd heard something faint, rhythmic, the sound of water dripping inside the fireplace. But when he looked, there was no leak. The roof above was intact, the fireplace cold, just the sound of droplets landing softly in the ash. He wrote it down, then forgot about it. By the end of October, the official search was scaled back. The Callaways' relatives placed missing posters in the surrounding towns. The most came down within weeks. The news covered it for 3 nights. Family of 4 vanishes on Idaho mountain trip. After that, the story was replaced by an election, a storm, and other tragedies closer to home. Back in Elkford, their house sat empty. The neighbors noticed that the porch light on a simple timer still turned on every night at 7 p.m. For months, it stayed that way, glowing across the empty lawn. The initial investigation found no motive, no debts, no criminal history, no known disputes or signs of domestic trouble. There were, however, a few oddities. Margaret's sister told police that Margaret had sounded off on the phone a week before the trip. She said Harold wasn't sleeping well, the sister recalled, She said he kept getting up at night, walking around the hallway. He said he was hearing things outside, like footsteps on the porch. When officers checked the house in Elkford, they found the back door latch recently replaced with a new bolt installed from the inside. The hardware receipt was dated only 3 days before the trip. Another note appeared in the case file. On October 3rd, 12 days before the family vanished, Harold had made a call to the Clearwater Sheriff's Office. He reported possible trespassers near their cabin at Pinarest. Said he found boot prints in the mud and a tin coffee cup left on the porch. When deputies arrived the next morning, there was nothing there. The report was filed and forgotten. In the absence of evidence, theories filled the void. Some believed the truck had gone off a remote road and was still buried deep in the forest, hidden under a landslide or fallen timber. Others whispered that Harold had grown tired of small-town life, that he'd planned it all, packed up his family, and disappeared north across the border. But those who knew him best doubted it. Harold wasn't impulsive. He wasn't the kind of man who left things undone. Margaret's co-workers said she would never leave without her students' report cards, which were found neatly stacked on her desk at home. And there was something else, a small detail that bothered Sheriff Dawson until the day he retired. When they searched the Callaways' home, everything was neat except for one drawer in Harold's study. Inside were old photographs, most of them from Harold's childhood. In one of the photos, taken sometime in the 1960s, 2 boys stood in front of the same cabin by Pinarest Lake. Harold was maybe 12. The other boy, older, stood half a step behind him. On the back of the photo, in faded pencil, was written, "Ray and me, summer 1961. Raymond Callaway, Harold's older brother." A name no one had mentioned in years. By December 1982, the case was officially declared cold. No sign of the family, no vehicle, no ransom, no footprints, nothing. Just a locked cabin, a missing truck, and a silence that grew heavier every winter. 10 years had passed since the Callaways vanished, and the case was little more than a line in a filing cabinet. Most of the original officers had retired or moved on. The sheriff who signed the final report was dead, and the cabin by Pinarest Lake had long since sagged beneath its own weight, swallowed by weeds and snow. In August of 1992, inside a gray, airless evidence warehouse in Clearwater County, Officer Donna Reyes was spending another quiet morning cataloging boxes no one wanted. She was 27, on light duty after a sprained knee, and assigned to archive reduction, which really meant throw away whatever looks useless. By mid-morning, she had stacked 6 cartons for disposal when she spotted one shoved behind an old filing cabinet. The tape was brittle, the corners softened by damp. Scrolled across the front in faded black marker were 4 words: Callaway Cabin, Oct. 82. She almost set it aside. Then curiosity won. Inside were 3 evidence bags. The first contained a few children's toys, a tiny wooden truck, a plastic crayon box, and a broken doll's arm. The second held a notebook half burned along one edge, the pages fused and blackened. The third bag, wrapped in brown paper, held a Kodak disposable camera, the kind you'd buy for $10 at a gas station. No log sheet, no signature, no digital record. As far as the department was concerned, this box didn't exist. Reyes stared at it for a moment. She'd grown up hearing the story. The Callaway family, gone without a trace, October 1982. Every kid in Idaho had. It was the kind of mystery that lived longer than the people investigating it. She carried the box to her desk, brushed off the dust, and slipped the camera from its paper wrapping. The plastic felt brittle with age. On the back, a strip of masking tape still clung to the surface with a faint note in pen. Cabin final roll. The film window showed 3 exposures left. She hesitated. Technically, developing it meant reopening an inactive case, and that was above her pay grade. But curiosity, or maybe something else, pushed her forward. That afternoon, she drove across town to Harper's Photo Lab, the last place in Clearwater County still developing 35mm film. The man behind the boy counter, gray-haired and slow, didn't even raise an eyebrow when she handed him the old camera. Reyes nodded, signed the form, and left. 3 days later, she returned. The clerk handed her a yellow envelope marked 12 exposures, processed successfully. Reyes opened it right there in the parking lot. The first few photos were harmless, ordinary, almost tender. Harold behind a grill, smoke curling around his smile. Margaret brushing Lucy's hair by the window. Samuel holding up a fish on the dock. Family moments frozen in amber. But midway through the stack, the images shifted. The lighting grew dimmer, the framing uneven, as if the person holding the camera no longer cared about centering the shot. The sixth photo showed the cabin interior at night, the curtains drawn, a lamp burning near the fireplace. No people. Then she reached the final print. It was darker than the rest, grainier, like it had been taken in near total darkness. Flash glare washed over the furniture, the edge of a table, and the wall behind it. Standing near the center of the frame was a man, Harold Calloway. His face was half-lit, eyes open, expression blank. He wasn't looking at the camera, more like he was listening to something beyond it. His shoulders sagged, his arms hung loose by his sides, and in one hand, barely visible in the reflection of the flash, something metallic caught the light. A cylinder, maybe the size of a flashlight or another camera. The timestamp printed along the bottom read 3:11 a.m. Reyes felt her stomach tighten. None of the other photos had timestamps, only this one. And according to every record she'd read, the Callays were last seen alive on October 15th, 1982. She looked again behind Harold. The fireplace was cold. The shadows stretched toward him as though the light were bending away. For a long moment, she just stood there beside her car, the envelope trembling slightly in her hand. It wasn't just what she saw, it was the stillness of it, like the moment before something moves. Back at the precinct, Reyes slid the photographs into new evidence sleeves, labeled them carefully, and sealed the box again. Then she wrote a short note and clipped it to the top. When she placed the box on Detective Grant Mercer's desk, he looked up, puzzled. "What's this?" "Something old," she said, "but maybe not done yet." That night, as the fluorescent lights buzzed over the empty office, Mercer sat alone at his desk, flipping through the photos one by one. When he reached the last image, Harold standing in the cabin's darkness, staring at something unseen, he felt an involuntary chill creep up his spine. 10 years of silence had just ended. The Calloway file was officially reopened. Detective Grant Mercer had seen his share of cold cases, but the Callays were different. He'd grown up in Clearwater County. He remembered the missing posters, the whispers about Pinarest Lake. He'd even gone to school with one of Margaret's former students. To him, the case wasn't history. It was unfinished business that had simply waited for the right pair of hands. When Officer Donna Reyes dropped the yellow envelope on his desk that summer afternoon in 1992, Mercer didn't expect much. Most old evidence amounted to nothing. But as he slid each photograph out of its sleeve, the family smiling by the lake, the kids with their toys, the gradual descent into darkness, he felt the same quiet pull every detective dreads, the sense that something had been left unsaid. And then came the final image. Harold Calloway standing in the cabin, 3:11 a.m., eyes open, expression blank, listening to something unseen. The timestamp alone was enough to shake him. It meant whoever took that picture was awake deep into the night they disappeared. By protocol, Mercer logged the find, reopened the case under re-evaluation, missing persons, Calloway, Harold, and family, and requested all archived files. The original reports arrived in a single, battered folder thick with dust and handwritten notes. Most of it was procedural, search grids, witness statements, weather logs. But inside one evidence bag, flattened between inventory forms, lay a half-burned notebook, the one found in the Callaway cabin fireplace 10 years earlier. The edges were fused, pages blackened to brittle lace. Still, a few lines had survived. Margaret's handwriting was clean, looping, precise. A teacher's hand, even when frightened. He walked again last night. Don't wake the kids. The lake sounds closer every night. Mercer read those lines 3 times. They were dated only a day before the disappearance. The words weren't dramatic, but something about the phrasing unsettled him. He walked again. Not, I heard something, not, someone's outside. The sentence carried familiarity, like this had happened before. He stared at the burned edge of the paper, wondering how much more had been lost to the fire. Then he picked up his keys. Pinnerest Lake was 2 hours from town, deeper now under years of regrowth. By the time Mercer arrived, the sun had already begun to slide behind the ridge. The forest pressed close around the single dirt road leading up to the Callaway cabin. No one had maintained it. Branches clawed at his windshield and grass split the tire tracks. When he finally saw the structure, it looked smaller than the photos. A slumped skeleton of a house, its roof bowed, its windows gray with dust. The chimney still stood, blackened with rain and moss. He stepped inside, slowly, breathing through the scent of rot and cedar. His flashlight beam swept across the interior, a table half collapsed, a rusted stove, curtains rotted to strips. The air was cold, even for August. He pictured the last night the family had been here, the kids asleep, Margaret writing, Harold pacing the floor. Somewhere between those moments and dawn, they had vanished. Mercer knelt by the fireplace where the notebook had been found. The bricks were still stained with soot. He brushed aside a layer of ash and spotted something odd. A small patch of floorboards near the hearth that didn't sit flush. He tapped them gently with his flashlight. The sound changed, hollow. He crouched lower, pried at the edge, and the plank lifted with a soft groan. Beneath it was a trapdoor roughly 2 feet wide, reinforced with old nails. It hadn't been mentioned in any report. Mercer worked the latch loose. The door creaked open, breathing out a wave of dry, stale air. He shined his light inside. A crawl space, shallow, maybe 3 feet deep, ran under the floor. The ground was compacted earth, dry and untouched for years. In one corner lay a small stack of cardboard boxes, their edges eaten by time. He climbed down carefully. The first box was empty except for shredded paper. The second contained a few old tools and what looked like a broken flashlight. The third, smaller and sturdier, had something scrolled across the top in black marker. Lucy's things. Mercer hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in a faded pink blanket, were objects that felt painfully human. A porcelain doll with one eye missing, a child's mitten, a handful of crayons melted together by heat, and beneath them, a small notebook, not Margaret's this time, but a sketchbook. He opened it gently. The pages were stiff but intact. Crayon drawings filled everyone. Stick figures, bright colors, uneven smiles. A family of 4 standing in front of a cabin beneath a yellow sun. He turned another page. Same image, different day. The sky now gray, trees bare. Another page, the same 4 figures, but the father drawn in red. The crayon pressed so hard it tore the paper. In the final drawing, the smallest figure, Lucy herself, had crossed out the father completely. Thick red lines over and over until the page nearly split. Mercer sat there in the crawl space, the flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The air was silent except for his own breathing. He stared at that final drawing, wondering what it meant to a 6-year-old, what she had seen or thought she saw in those last days. He replaced everything carefully, sealing the box again, and climbed out. Before closing the trapdoor, he shined his light one last time beneath the floorboards. A single shoe print marked the dry soil, too large to be a child's, half pressed into the dirt as if someone had knelt there years before. He took a photo, marked the coordinates, and stood up. The cabin creaked in the wind like something remembering. The more Detective Grant Mercer learned about the Callaways, the less sense it made. The photographs, the burned journal, the trapdoor, they felt like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. Harold's blank stare at 3:11 a.m. still haunted him. But now he had something tangible, a direction. Someone else had been inside that cabin. He just didn't know who. A week after his first visit to Pinarest, Mercer drove back up the same mountain road, this time to meet a man named Earl Haskins. Earl was a retired forest ranger, 72, with hands like leather and a voice that rasped from decades of cold mornings. He'd worked the Pinarest district from the late 70s through the mid-80s and knew every ridge and deer trail within 50 miles. When Mercer mentioned the Callaway name over the phone, Earl had gone quiet for a long moment before saying, "You know, I might have found something back then. I didn't think it mattered." Now, in the dim light of Earl's cabin, the old man shuffled to a wooden trunk and pulled out a tin coffee can. Inside, wrapped in a handkerchief, lay a Kodak camera. Sun faded yellow, dust packed into its creases. "Picked it up near the Pinarest Trail. Summer of '83, Earl said, lying right in the mud about half a mile from the lake. Film still inside. Figured it belonged to a hiker." Mercer's pulse kicked once, sharply. He took the camera carefully, gloved hands steady. The label on the bottom matched the batch numbers of cameras sold in 1982. It could easily have been the Callaways. "Why didn't you turn it in?" Mercer asked. Earl shrugged. "Sheriff's boys said the case was cold. Nothing up there worth stirring. So I tossed it in the box and forgot. Guess I'm not sleeping great these days thinking on it." Back in Clearwater, Mercer delivered the camera to the forensic photo lab. They promised to treat it delicately. The film would be brittle, the emulsion thin from years of heat and cold. 3 days later, he received a call. "You might want to come see this yourself." He did. The lab tech, a young woman named Kendra, had laid out 7 photographs on the light table, each developed from the salvaged roll. The colors had aged to amber, but the details were clear enough. Photo 1, a stand of pine trees, tall and still, bathed in morning fog. Photo 2, the lake, silver and glass flat, no ripples, no people. Photo 3, the edge of the dock, a fishing line coiled on the planks. Photo 4, the sky, clouds stretching pink over the ridge, the kind of shot someone takes while waiting for dinner to cook. Then the tone shifted. Photo 5, the cabin door open a few inches, warm light spilling from inside. The shot was crooked, as if taken in a hurry. You could see part of a figure's shoulder just inside the frame, not distinct, only a blur of plaid. Photo 6, the front steps of the porch. The focus was poor, but in the lower right corner, illuminated by the flash, stood the toe of a boot, heavy, mud-stained, facing towards the camera. Photo 7, the last on the roll taken from inside the cabin, looking out through the window. The flash had reflected off the glass, but beyond the glare in the darkness outside was a shape, tall, motionless, standing just beyond the edge of light. A man, his outline sharp against the trees. The timestamp printed faintly across the bottom read, 4:02 a.m. Mercer studied the images one by one. The first 4 breathed calm. The last 3 felt suffocating. The progression mirrored the Callaway case itself, a weekend trip that started ordinary and ended in silence. He looked again at the sixth photo, the one with the boot. "Can we estimate the size?" he asked. Kendra nodded. "Roughly 11 in from heel to toe. That's around a men's size 11. Maybe 1112. Definitely not small." Mercer flipped through Harold's personnel file. Shoe size, 9. He felt the weight of that number settle in his chest. If Harold wasn't wearing those boots, someone else was. He walked the photographs down to the evidence lab for a full analysis, contrast adjustment, light balance, reflection study. After an hour of silence, the technician pointed to a faint reflection in the window of the final photo. "See this?" he said. "Looks like the flash caught something metallic inside the cabin. Could be another camera." Mercer nodded slowly. 2 cameras, 2 sets of eyes, one looking in, one looking out. He added it to his notes. Recovered secondary film roll consistent with 1982 Kodak model. Final exposure 4:02 a.m. Shows adult male figure outside cabin. Boot size estimated men's 11. Harold Calloway confirmed size 9. Implication: secondary individual present. Then he wrote one more line beneath it, smaller. If Harold wasn't the photographer, who was standing outside? And who was still awake inside at 4 a.m. that night? Mercer pinned the new photographs beside the earlier ones on his office corkboard. On the left, Harold and his family smiling by the lake. In the center, the burned journal fragment, Margaret's neat handwriting. He walked again last night. On the right, the new sequence. Each image darkening until the last, the shadow outside the glass. Together, they told a story that felt almost human, but not quite sane. Someone awake when everyone else slept. Someone watching through windows, waiting for something only they could hear. Mercer sat back in his chair. The office clock clicked past midnight. Somewhere outside, rain started to fall against the windows. Soft, steady, like footsteps. He didn't move. He just listened. The evidence didn't lie. There had been 2 cameras, 2 photographers, and at least one man alive and moving through the cabin hours after the rest of the Callaways were gone. And now, 10 years later, those same eyes, whoever they belonged to, were staring back at him from a strip of faded film. Weeks into the reopened case, Mercer found the missing name, Raymond Calloway, Harold's older brother, Army technician, discharged in 1978 after diagnosis of insomnia and night hallucinations. After that, nothing. No address, no records, no trace. A single photo survived. 2 boys in front of the Pinnerest cabin. The younger smiling, the elder looking away. On the back, Ray and Harold, summer 1961. The same cabin that would swallow the Callaways 20 years later. Tracing old records, Mercer saw Raymond's last postings were in Idaho. He would have known every logging trail and service road near Pinnerest. Ranger logs from 1979 to 81 mentioned a mute drifter camping in the area, stealing food, vanishing before dawn. No one had linked the name. In a 1982 interview file, a shopkeeper described a man who looked like Harold buying rope, canned food, and coffee. He never spoke. Deputies marked it unrelated. Mercer didn't. The pattern grew clearer. 2 weeks before vanishing, Harold had called police about footsteps outside the cabin. Dismissed as wildlife, Margaret's burned journal echoed the same rhythm. He walked again last night. Don't wake the kids. The repetition wasn't fear of an animal. It was recognition. Raymond's discharge notes read, "No roaming, auditory hallucinations. Believes he must walk to keep walls still." The words matched hers exactly. He pictured that last night. Harold awake, hearing footsteps he already knew. The brother who never learned to sleep, returning from the dark. Maybe he opened the door. Maybe he shouldn't have. The missing piece had a name now, and it fit every space in the story. The figure in the window, the boot by the porch, the man awake at 3 a.m. None of them were strangers. Whatever haunted the Callaway cabin hadn't come from the woods. It had come home. In May 1993, a forestry survey team mapping runoff zones near Pinarest stumbled on metal beneath a slope of packed soil and roots. At first, they thought it was debris from an old logging vehicle. When they cleared the surface, a blue fragment of paint appeared, the same color listed in the 1982 report for the Callaway family's Ford F-150. The truck was half buried, nose down in the dirt, its frame twisted by years of frost and thaw. 5 kilometers from the cabin, it had gone unseen for a decade. Inside were 3 bodies. Margaret Callaway in the passenger seat, Samuel and Lucy belted in the back. All 3 skeletal, the remains fragile, but positioned upright, as if they had been sitting quietly when the vehicle went over the edge. The ignition was off, the brake unengaged. There were no fractures suggesting impact trauma from a fall. The slide had been slow, deliberate. The driver's seat was pulled too far back for Harold to have reached the pedals. On the steering wheel, a separate set of fingerprints was preserved in a film of resin, later confirmed through lab analysis as belonging to Raymond Callaway. The discovery cracked open what 10 years of searching could not. Harold was still missing, but the others had been found, and the evidence said the man who'd driven that truck wasn't him. Mercer stood at the excavation site as the vehicle was hoisted from the dirt, the lake wind moving through the trees. Beneath the rust, he could still make out the faint curve of a bumper sticker. Clearwater Hydroelect. Electric employee. Family picnic, 81. A small, ordinary piece of life, now unearthed with the dead. He imagined the moment before the descent. Engine idling, the children asleep. Margaret beside the window and Raymond in the driver's seat, silent. The distance between the brothers had ended here, on this slope. A year later, another file crossed his desk. An unidentified male found in 1984, deep within Pinarest Forest, had never been matched to any missing person. When the remains were retested under the new DNA registry, the result closed the circle. Raymond Callaway. The body had been lying less than 2 miles from the ridge, weathered and partially buried beneath pine needles. His jacket was military issue, torn at the sleeve. In the pocket were 2 items, a set of keys marked Ford and a faded Polaroid photograph. The image showed Harold Callaway seated in the cabin's main room, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees as if asleep or posed. No timestamp, no handwriting, just that stillness again. The same silence that ran through every piece of the case. The final report arrived in autumn of 1994, a thick folder bound in gray twine. After 11 years, dozens of dead ends, and 1 grave reopened. The Callaway case closed with 20 lines of text. The conclusion read, "Homicide-suicide sequence initiated by Raymond Callaway. Harold Callaway presumed deceased prior to vehicle incident." Beneath it, Mercer's initials appeared in careful ink, a small signature beneath the ruin of 2 families. The evidence formed a grim but coherent pattern. Raymond had been living in the Pinarest woods for months before the disappearance, surviving in shacks and runoff tunnels, scavenging food from nearby cabins. His military discharge and records of hallucinations suggested a slow unraveling. A man untethered from the world, orbiting the only place that still felt familiar. Harold had known. The half-burned journal, The late-night phone call, the silence in Margaret's entries, all hinted that he had tried to protect them without revealing the truth. Perhaps he believed his brother would stay hidden, or perhaps he thought leaving would spare them all. On the night of October 17th, 1982, that fragile plan collapsed. The prints near the cabin, the second camera, and the evidence of a brief struggle told the story that words never could. Raymond returned, maybe seeking warmth, forgiveness, or a home he no longer recognized. Harold confronted him. There was shouting, a blow, something sharp or sudden that ended it before dawn. When Margaret woke, her husband was gone, and the man outside wasn't a stranger. In panic or madness, Raymond took control. He gathered the family, told them they were leaving, and drove into the dark. The descent down the slope wasn't fast. It was quiet, deliberate. The brake was never touched. Raymond lived for months afterward. Tracks found miles from the crash site, the remnants of campfires circling back toward the ridge. He wandered through the snow-blind woods, carrying the photograph and a rusted keyring. One man drifting between guilt and survival. When the winter turned, temperatures dropped below -20. He was found that January beneath a pine at the forest's edge, seated upright, frost in his beard, eyes half open. In one gloved hand, he held the photo of Harold and Lucy, the same image missing from the family album. There were no signs of violence, only a posture that suggested waiting. The coroner wrote that exposure was the cause of death. Mercer never believed it was that simple. In his notes, he added a final line not meant for the record. He thought he escaped justice, but the forest never forgot his footsteps. The pines had buried what law could not. 2 years later, lightning struck the old Callaway cabin during a summer storm. Fire consumed it within minutes. The structure, already brittle from decades of weather, collapsed before firefighters reached the ridge. By morning, only the stone foundation remained, a rectangle of ash and silence. When the county rebuilt the trail markers the following spring, they set a small bronze plaque near the lake's edge. The Callaways lost to the pines, 1982. Visitors still left wildflowers beside it. Most didn't know the story. They only knew a family had once lived here and never came home. Detective Mercer retired that same year. In his office drawer, he kept a single photograph from the case. The image recovered by Officer Reyes in 1992. Harold standing in the cabin at 3:11 a.m. His face lit by the camera's flash, his gaze fixed beyond the frame. For years, Mercer had believed Harold was looking toward the window, watching something move in the dark outside. But now, after everything, he saw it differently. The expression wasn't fear. It was recognition. Harold hadn't been looking into the night. He'd been looking at the figure stepping toward him, a shape born from his own shadow. In the end, both brothers stayed where they had always belonged, in the silence of the forest. One beneath the earth, the other inside a photograph that never stopped listening. If it moved you, follow for more stories like this, quiet, true, and hard to forget.